OK, for now, thank you. Man's been fitted with the first ankle tag which monitors if people convicted of alcohol-related crime are still drinking. The so-called sobriety tags test the wearer's sweat every half an hour to see if it contains alcohol. If a trace is found, they could face a harsher sentence. It's being trialled in 4 London boroughs. According to the Greater London Authority, alcohol-related crime costs between £8 and £13 billion a year. And 2 out of 5 A&E attendances are because of drink-related injuries. They say that the tag would save money, costing £1,800 for 6 months in comparison to £22,000 for a stay in prison.
The objective is to drive down alcohol-related offences. Crime is generally coming down in London, but obviously there is a problem in town centres, people getting drunk, getting violent, and you need to take the drink out of them, and this is being proved in America to be a very good way of doing it.
So, is it a good idea? Kate Andrews is from the Adam Smith Institute and is against the tags. Ed Boyd from the Centre for Social Justice thinks that they are a good idea. Ladies first. Why do you reach your view?
Alcohol tags are the most intense and intrusive form of policing that we can do outside of prison. They monitor your consumption 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and completely undermine the person's autonomy. So if we are going to adopt this policy, and that is a very big if, we have to decide when it's appropriate to do so. And there are a lot of issues with the mayor's proposed plan. It assumes that offenders are going to repeat the offense without them doing so in the first place, targets alcohol as the issue rather than other issues that could potentially be affecting the offender. But I think the key thing to recognize here is that the mayor has not distinguished between violent offenders who have potentially created multiple violent offenses with weapons and drunk kids who are guilty of antisocial behavior.
Ed, it's not against the law to drink, so what if somebody is drinking?
Well, it's not against the law to drink, but it is against the law to commit crime. And this is what this is focusing on. It's this hub of people who, because they're drinking, it's leading them to commit crime. We know in 40% of domestic violence cases, alcohol was a factor. We know in half of violent crime, alcohol was a factor there. So I think what very reasonably Boris Johnson is proposing is something evidence-based to work. There's a number of studies that have been done in the United States that show that it dramatically increases levels of sobriety and can lead to reductions in crime. I think if we can find a way of tackling criminal activity by undermining one of the root causes that leads to it, we should be all for it.
Nobody's questioning whether or not alcohol can play a part in crime, but many things can play a part in crime. We just discovered that the World Cup statistics in 2010 increased domestic violence in England by 38%. So nobody's questioning that alcohol and other things can play a part in crime. The question is, this policy that is being implemented is going to target those who are guilty of spitting, who are guilty of being too loud in their homes or playing too loud of music. The mayor has not distinguished who will be subject to these alcohol tags and when. It is going to be within the court's jurisdiction to implement this policy and to implement these tags to people who are guilty of minor offenses. It is an incredibly slippery slope to say that at any point the government can come into a free society outside of prison and say outside of rehabilitation centers and tell people, and offenders are people too and citizens too, what they can and cannot consume.
So I think it's really important to separate out one thing from another. It's fine to go out, have some drinks, and no one is saying let's stop that. No, stop people from, if you want to get rowdy, that's fine. We're talking here about people who are going out and are committing crimes off the back of drinking. This is very few people. And we know from the evidence in South Dakota, for example, where this survey is done, where this has been piloted before, that it's had a massive effect on reducing the people that go out drink driving. It's had a 9% reduction across the whole county in terms of reducing domestic violence. When you've got something that we know that when you implement it well in an area, it can reduce offences in the way that it has done, I think it's worth using it because you've got to start thinking about some of the communities that are being ravaged by antisocial behaviour, by so-called low-level criminality that is affecting them day in, day out, with people shouting at their windows, throwing things at them, shouting abuse at them. These are the communities we should be protecting. We talk about people's liberties. Yes, completely agree. Of course, offenders are people, and that's why we've actually got to invest in turning their lives around. This is what part of this sobriety tag is all about. We've got to think about the liberty of those people, the partners of people who are abusing alcohol, people living in their community who are suffering abuse off the back of this. These are the people that the sobriety tag will help, and this is why we should welcome it.
South Dakota has some of the highest domestic abuse rates in the entire country. I'm not overwhelmingly impressed by their reduction of 9% thanks to these alcohol tags. In fact, I think you could put way too much trust in them and say that a lot of people are being returned to their homes with husbands, wives, and children there and still committing these crimes. So maybe we're putting too much trust in alcohol tags. But to further your point about it not being that many people within the UK who are under alcohol intoxication when they commit crimes. It's actually 2/3 of people when arrested who have been drinking alcohol, and that is arguably connected to their crimes. But you're again using the word crime way too loosely. The mayor came out and said anybody who is caught with a knife, using that knife against somebody else or using assault against somebody else will potentially be tagged with one of these tags. There could be an argument for it, but at the moment there's been no distinction made between the 2/3 of people who commit crimes that include graffiti, vandalism, shouting at their neighbor, being sarcastic in some circumstances. We know that the courts have abused antisocial behavior orders. What is going to stop them from abusing alcohol tags?
And what if people don't want to wear a tag? What should happen to them then?
Well, let me take the first question first. I don't think being sarcastic will ever be a crime. I'm quite glad that's the case. People aren't going to be given a sobriety tag off the back of that. But in terms of whether or not they should be given them, let's not forget these are people who have committed criminal activity. This isn't intervention that we know. Well, they have done. They've been convicted by a court for committing a crime.
We never thought that antisocial behavior orders would be used against people who committed sarcasm, but they have been. We were told
You're talking about insulting words and behaviour, aren't we, really, rather than sarcasm? I think you're shortening it.
Sure, but we have some outrageous cases of people playing music too loudly or being noisier in their own homes where they have been committed with antisocial behavior orders.
Okay, well, let Ed respond.
So on your point there, we know that this is something that's evidence-based to reduce the chances that people will go on to commit further crimes.
Yeah, but what if they say, you know what, I'm not going to wear that tag? What should happen to them then?
Well, the whole scheme is based around the fact that if somebody, you know, they're given a tag and every 30 minutes it measures whether or not they've had a drink. And if they have, one of the really crucial parts of this pilot to make sure that they hold true to the original model to increase the chance of success in making sure there's a swift and a certain response to it. So it's going to require the judiciary, the police, the probation service to work really closely together to make sure straight away they're knocking on the door and saying, look, we know that you've breached your order, you will be going back to court, and there'll be a consequence as a result of what you've done. Where it could break down, and where I think we need to be careful, is if that doesn't happen. If people breach their order and they realise, wait a second, if I drink, no one does anything. So that's one of the crucial things we've got to get right.
Final thought from you.
Seems to me that the breakdown is the fact that the police are tracking people for committing potentially violent crimes, potentially non-violent crimes, hasn't been distinguished, coming to their doors 30 seconds after they take off a bracelet and knocking on it. So it's a very dangerous precedent that they can do this anytime and all the time.
OK, we must leave it there. Fascinating subject. Adam Smith. It's Adam Smith Institute.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And that's basically against... Just tell us very quickly about the Adam Smith Institute.
It is a non-partisan free market think tank that advocates classically liberal ideas for the community.
There you go. And that's Kate Andrews representing it, and also Ed Boyd from the Centre for Social Justice. Thank you both for joining us on Sky News this afternoon. Thank you. Still to come, latest business news. Why a food scandal in China has hurt the firm behind KFC and Pizza Hut. Stay tuned.